The breach in Sector 84. The void of deep space beyond the orbit of Saturn was defined by its eternal, absolute silence. Millions of miles away, the golden rings of the gas giant swept through the dark in slow, solemn motion, catching the distant gleam of the sun. For millennia, this sector of Earth's solar system had known nothing but the predictable orbit of icy moons and cosmic dust. Then reality cracked open like glass. Without warning, the fabric of spacetime strained, warped, and tore open in a jagged, violent fissure spanning tens of kilometers. Brilliant violet arcs of extra-dimensional lightning surged along the rim of the fracture, illuminating the void with unnatural radiance. Gravitational anomalies rippled outward, sending stray asteroids tumbling wildly out of their orbits. Out from the abyssal tier glided a vessel unlike anything known to the universe of Earth 616. It was a staggering, spherical dreadnought, a floating fortress of white and polished purple alloy several kilometers in diameter, flanked by sleek scout cruisers and heavy artillery tenders. On its pristine hull was stamped a sharp, minimalist emblem recognized with sheer terror across entire galaxies in a different realm, the crest of the Frieza force. The spatial rift snapped shut behind the Armada with a violent implosion of radiation, leaving the Imperial fleet floating in the cold silence of an unfamiliar cosmos. The command bridge. Inside the central hub of the flagship, the air smelled faintly of ozone and metallic coolant. Hundreds of alien personnel, clad in identical battle armor featuring flexible shoulder guards and waist skirts, sat at curved console banks arranged in concentric circles around an elevated central platform. The hum of hyper-advanced computers was punctuated by the rhythmic, high-pitched chirping of dozens of scouters. At the focal point of the bridge sat a tiny, pale figure within a sleek, white-and-purple hovering pod. Lord Frieza rested his chin on his knuckles. His long, thick, purple-tipped tail whipped slowly from side to side behind the pod, tapping rhythmically against the metal shell. Crimson eyes, dark and cold as frozen blood, gazed out through the panoramic viewport at the unfamiliar star field. "Report," Frieza commanded. His voice was silky, high-pitched, and laced with an understated menace that made every soldier within earshot stiffen. "Where are we? This does not match the star charts of planet Vegeta's sector, nor does it resemble any recorded galaxy within the northern quadrant." Commander Zarbin stepped forward onto the central dais, sweeping his long braid of green hair over his shoulder. He reached up to touch his red-tinted scouter, adjusting the dial as blue data streams cascaded across the lens. "Lord Frieza," Zarbin began smoothly, bowing his head slightly. "It appears the experimental long-range warp drive suffered a severe field collapse. The spatial anomaly dislocated us entirely from our known coordinates. Our navigational computers cannot locate planet Frieza number 79, nor can they lock onto the signal of any Imperial relays." Beside Zarbin, a hulking, pink-skinned alien with spiky protrusions covering his head and arms stepped forward. Dodoria let out a harsh, rasping laugh, slamming a heavy fist into his open palm. "Bah, who cares where we are?" Dodoria sneered. "We have enough fuel and firepower to blow up a dozen star systems. Wherever we are, it all belongs to the Frieza force now anyway." "Quiet, Dodoria," Zarbin said coolly, casting a sidelong glance at his counterpart. "We must first ascertain whether this space is inhabited and if it contains valuable real estate for the Empire." "Zarbin is correct, Dodoria," Frieza purred, turning his glass of dark wine between two clawed fingers. "A refined ruler does not blindly smash his new possessions before assessing their worth. Zarbin, what do the long-range sensors indicate?" Zarbin tapped his scouter again. The small device emitted a rapid sequence of high-pitched beeps as it scanned the system ahead. "Fascinating, my lord," Zarbin reported, a thin smile gracing his refined features. "The third planet from the local star is a rich blue-green world teeming with liquid water and organic life. Oxygen-nitrogen atmosphere, abundant natural resources, and an estimated population of over 8 billion sentient inhabitants." 8 billion? Frieza's lips curled into a cruel, satisfied smile. "Splendid. A dense labor pool or a massive planetary liquidating sail? And what of their military capability? Do these locals possess power levels worth taking note of? Zarbon adjusted the frequency on his scouter, narrowing his focus toward the distant blue planet. Beep, beep, beep. The base population reads as utterly insignificant, Lord Frieza, Zarbon said, reading the flickering numbers. The average life form registers between 2 and 5 units, absolute insects. A single squad of low-class troopers could subjugate the entire world in an afternoon. Dodoria cackled loudly. Gahahaha, hear that, Lord Frieza? Let me take the advance guard down there. I'll turn their main cities into ash before sunset. Hold your excitement, Dodoria, Zarbon interrupted, his eyebrow twitching as his scouter began to chirp with erratic spikes. This is strange. I am picking up isolated anomaly clusters across the planet's northern landmass, small, localized pockets of energy. Oh, Frieza raised a single eyebrow, leaning back into his pod. Define anomaly. The readings are irregular, Zarbon frowned, fine-tuning the calibration. They do not register as standard Chi signatures. Some show extreme thermal output, others resemble concentrated radiation, and a few are fluctuating in ways the scouter cannot process. A handful of these signatures are spiking into the thousands, tens of thousands, and a few brief blips crossed past 50,000. Dodoria stopped laughing, his small yellow eyes widening slightly. 50,000 on a planet of weaklings. Frieza let out a soft, musical chuckle, a sound that sent a cold shudder down the spines of the bridge crew. Tens of thousands, Frieza murmured, swirling his wine once more. How delightfully unexpected. It seems this backwater world has a few colorful bugs crawling on its surface. It would be terribly boring if they simply surrendered without a fight. Frieza set his glass down on the pod's side console and folded his arms. Dodoria, prepare 3 Vanguard battalions. Launch the drop pods. Let us introduce these primitive creatures to their new master. SWORD Orbital Station, the Peak. In low Earth orbit, 40,000 miles above the atmosphere, SWORD's primary defense facility. The Peak was plunged into red emergency lighting. Klaxons roared through the steel corridors. Inside the main tactical command center, dozens of human, alien, and android analysts were shouting over the noise of blaring telemetry monitors. Director Brand, an agent shouted from the primary radar pit. Deep Space Sensor Array 4 just went dark. We have a massive spatial rupture near Saturn's orbit. Commander Abigail Brand strode onto the elevated command platform, her green hair catching the crimson flash of the emergency lights. She pulled down her dark sunglasses, her bright eyes narrowing as she glared at the giant holographic display hovering in the center of the room. Talk to me, Johnson, Brand snapped, her voice firm and commanding. Is it a Kree battle fleet, Skrull stealth armada, Shi'ar Vanguard? Negative, Director, the analyst replied frantically, pulling up a high-definition optical render. The ship's signatures don't match any known empire in the galactic registry. It's massive, ma'am. A central dreadnought over 3 miles wide, surrounded by hundreds of smaller escort craft. On the central hologram, the image rendered clearly. The sleek, purple and white spherical hull of Frieza's flagship, shimmering against the backdrop of space. They just cleared Saturn's gravity well, another officer called out. They aren't hailing us, they aren't broadcasting any diplomatic frequencies, and Director, they just launched entry pods. How many? Brand demanded, leaning over the console. Initial wave, 300 units, high-velocity entry trajectories. They're heading straight for Earth. Brand reached into her coat and slapped her comms badge, linking directly to the Avengers' priority override frequency. All Avengers units, this is Director Brand at SWORD Command, she said calmly, though her grip on the console tightened until her knuckles turned white. We have an unidentified, highly hostile alien fleet entering Earth's atmosphere. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is an alpha-level planetary invasion. Mobilize immediately. Avengers Tower, New York City. The midday sun shone brightly over Manhattan, gleaming off the glass spire of Avengers Tower. Inside the upper lounge, Tony Stark was adjusting a holographic schematic of his latest Mark VIII armor when Brand's emergency broadcast echoed through the room. Across the table, Steve Rogers stood up instantly, grabbing his vibranium shield from its wall rack. Thor, sitting nearby with a mug of mead, set his glass down with a heavy thud, his eyes glowing with electric blue lightning as Mjolnir crackled on the table beside him. "Tony, talk to me," Steve said, strapping the shield to his forearm. "What are we looking at?" Stark's eyes swept over the incoming orbital telemetry hovering from his StarkNet interface. "Big numbers, Cap. SWORD is tracking 300 landing pods breaking through the upper stratosphere right now, spread out over North America, Western Europe, and East Asia." "Are they landing or are they weapons?" Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, asked as she floated into the room from the balcony, her body already aura-clad in golden energy. "They look like personal transport pods," Stark replied, tapping his chest plate. Nanotech poured over his body, encasing him in gold and crimson armor within seconds. "Whoever is inside isn't waiting to negotiate. They're coming down fast and hard." Thor picked up Mjolnir, a battle-hungry grin spreading across his bearded face. "Then let them fall. It has been far too long since Earth tested its steel against invaders from the stars." "Don't get cocky, Thor," Steve warned, adjusting his helmet strap. "We don't know who they are or what they want. Tony, contact the Baxter Building and the X-Mansion. Tell them to scramble defense teams for their respective sectors. Carol, Thor, take the sky. Tony and I will coordinate ground response in New York." "Understood." Captain Marvel burst out through the balcony, blasting into the sky like a gold meteor, with Thor riding a crackling thunderbolt right beside her. The descent. Across the globe, the sky began to bleed fire. Citizens in New York, London, Tokyo, and Paris looked up in horror as hundreds of glowing red streaks tore through the clouds. The sound was deafening, a sonic roar that shattered windows across metropolitan districts. In Midtown Manhattan, 3 heavy metallic pods smashed directly into the pavement of Times Square, plowing massive craters into the asphalt, crushing vehicles, and sending giant plumes of dust and shattered concrete into the air. Panic screams filled the air as pedestrians fled in every direction. Police sirens wailed helplessly as smoke rose from the impact zones. The spherical pod doors hissed, unlocking with a sharp release of pressurized steam. The heavy doors popped outward, falling onto the street with heavy metallic clangs. Out stepped the vanguard of the Frieza force. They were grotesque alien mercenaries, some reptilian with scaled skin, others multi-eyed horrors with jagged claws, all wearing the uniform armor of Frieza's army. Scouters of various colors glowed over their left eyes, flashing with crimson data streams. The squad captain, a towering green-skinned alien with 3 yellow eyes, stepped onto the hood of a crushed yellow taxi. He clicked his scouter, looking around at the towering skyscrapers and fleeing humans. "Power levels 234, the captain cackled, raising his wrist-mounted arm cannon. "What a pathetic planet. Lord Frieza was too generous sending us. Purge the sector, leave no survivors." The soldiers raised their hands and arm cannons. Bright purple and green energy blasts erupted from their palms, tearing through buildings, vaporizing cars, and detonating storefronts in a chaotic cascade of fire and destruction. "Halt!" A heavy vibranium shield ricocheted through the smoke, striking the captain square in the chest with enough force to shatter his chest plate, sending him flying backward through the window of a department store. The shield curved through the air and snapped back into the hand of Captain America, who stepped out from the smoke alongside Iron Man. "Not on our watch," Cap growled. Iron Man's repulsors whined to full power, glowing brilliant blue. "All right, Space Ugly, welcome to Earth. Now drop the weapons, or we test how durable that armor really is." The remaining alien soldiers turned, their scouters beeping frantically as they locked onto Iron Man and Captain America. "Power levels spiking, 8000, 12,000, one soldier yelled in disbelief. "That's impossible," the scan said. "Scans don't cover local hospitality." Stark fired 2 high-intensity repulsor rays, blasting 2 soldiers off their feet and sending them crashing through an overhead billboard. High above Earth, far above the burning atmospheric entry, inside the central viewport of the Imperial dreadnought, Lord Frieza watched the holoscreen displays showing the initial engagements across Earth. He watched as his soldiers were pushed back in New York by armored heroes, in London by magic-wielding defenders, and in Japan by mutant strike teams. Zarbon's scouter clicked repeatedly as he monitored the casualties. Lord Frieza, the vanguard in Sector 4, is suffering heavy losses. These local champions possess far greater combat capability than their base biology suggested. Dodoria gritted his teeth, his spiky brow furrowing with rage. Useless fools, dying to a bunch of unranked primitives. Lord Frieza, grant me permission to go down there. I'll wipe out their entire defense force in 5 minutes. Frieza didn't look angry. In fact, his smile only widened, revealing perfectly straight white teeth. He took a slow breath, his crimson eyes gleaming with cold delight. How delightful, Frieza purred quietly, his tail flicking with rising excitement. It has been so very long since a planet offered genuine resistance. Dodoria, Zarbon, prepare my personal pod. Frieza stood up from his floating throne, his small, compact frame radiating a faint, suffocating purple aura that caused the bridge's metal flooring to groan under sud. Den pressure. It seems I must teach these Earthlings the difference between playing hero and facing a true emperor. The first target. The air over North America smelled of molten concrete and scorched ozone. What had begun as a calm afternoon in major cities across the globe turned into an unprecedented theater of war within minutes. Across New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles, the sky burned red as dozens of spherical drop pods smashed through the upper atmosphere, plowing into metropolitan streets and leaving cratered ruins in their wake. In Times Square, the smoke hung thick and dark, illuminated only by the intermittent glow of shattered neon signs and the neon-pink energy blasts tearing through the architecture. Commander Zarbon's personal vanguard unit had secured a 3-block radius, reducing surrounding storefronts to smoldering rubble. Standing atop the crushed remains of an armored police transport, Zarbon adjusted his red scouter, his long green braids swaying gently in the rising heat. Fascinating, Zarbon murmured, a cold, analytical smile crossing his elegant face. The atmospheric density and gravity here are unremarkable, yet the local infrastructure shows surprising structural variety. A pity it must be dismantled. Beside him, Dodoria stepped forward, his massive pink boots crunching shattered glass into dust. He flexed his thick fingers, his spiky shoulders rising as he surveyed the chaos. Dismantled? Why stop there, Zarbon? Dodoria boomed with a coarse, rasping laugh. Lord Frieza wants this planet pacified. I say we vaporize this entire grid, turn their primary command structures into a crater and make the survivors crawl. Control yourself, Dodoria, Zarbon replied without looking at him. Brutality without strategy is mere savagery. Lord Frieza values efficiency. Look at your scouter readings. Dodoria grunted, tapping his scouter's side button. The lens flickered wildly, emitting a rapid sequence of high-pitched chirps. Beep, 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 beep. What in the world? Dodoria's small yellow eyes widened. The numbers on those approaching signals, 8,500, 14,000, 22,000, that's impossible. A moment ago, this entire quadrant registered under 10 units. They were masking their power, or their combat output spikes dynamically, Zarbon noted, his demeanor sharpening as his own scouter tracked incoming aerial targets at extreme velocity. Prepare yourselves, incoming. Clash over Manhattan. The clouds above 42nd Street shattered with a thunderous sonic boom. A blinding streak of golden energy cut through the thick black smoke, followed closely by a crackling bolt of lightning that lit up the afternoon sky. Captain Marvel tore through the air at Mach 10, her body wrapped in a brilliant aura of photon energy. Her eyes glowed with cosmic power as she locked onto Dodoria, slamming into the pink brute at full speed. Boom! The kinetic force of the impact shook the surrounding skyscrapers, blowing out every remaining window within 4 blocks. Dodoria gasped as the air was violently forced from his lungs, his heavy body skidding backward across 200 feet of asphalt, tearing a deep trench through the street before crashing through the steel pillars of a parking garage. "What the hell are you creatures?" Carol Danvers hovered 20 feet above the street, her fists burning with golden fire as her boots hovered above the pavement. "You drop into our city, start blasting civilians, and expect us to sit back." Before Zarbin could order a counterattack, the sound of rolling thunder echoed through the canyon of buildings. A spinning blur of metal tore through 3 alien soldiers, shattering their chest plates and sending them crashing into the surrounding walls. Mjolnir curved gracefully through the air, snapping back into the calloused hand of Thor, god of thunder. He descended onto the pavement, his red cape billowing in the hot wind, his blue eyes ablaze with divine power. "Heed my words, invaders," Thor's voice echoed like a brass horn over the burning square. "You have set foot upon Midgard with malice in your hearts. Yield now or face the full wrath of Asgard." Zarbin adjusted his scouter, his refined composure slipping slightly as the digital readouts on both Carol Danvers and Thor glitched, resetting continuously as their power output surged. Power levels exceeding 30,000. No, 45,000, Zarbin thought, his jaw tightening. This planet's elite fighters aren't ordinary biologicals. Their energy signatures don't conform to standard Kai profiles. From the rubble of the parking garage, a roar of pure rage erupted. Dodoria burst through the concrete debris, his body covered in dust, blood dripping from his spiky brow. His face was twisted into a mask of hideous fury. "You miserable insect," Dodoria screamed, pointing a thick-clawed finger at Captain Marvel. "You dare lay a hand on Lord Dodoria? I'll tear you limb from limb and eat your heart." "Do?" Doria opened his jaws wide, charging a massive, pink energy sphere within his mouth. The concentrated Kai hummed violently, distorting the air around his head before erupting in a blinding beam focused directly at Carol. "Carol, heads up!" Iron Man shouted, dropping out of the sky on repulsor boots, accompanied by Captain America, who landed heavily on a nearby ruined car. Captain Marvel didn't flinch. Instead of dodging, she flew directly into the path of Dodoria's maximum power Kai beam, crossing her forearms to take the full blast head-on. The pink energy engulfed her completely, washing over her body in a searing wave of destruction that melted the pavement beneath her feet. Dodoria cackled maniacally, pouring every ounce of his power into the attack. "Gahaha, die, burn into ash," Dodoria laughed wildly. The beam faded, leaving a trail of glass and liquid metal. Standing in the center of the scorched zone was Carol Danvers, unscathed. Her photon aura was no longer golden. It pulsed with a deep, radiant violet light, crackling with absorbed extra-dimensional energy. "Is that all you've got?" Carol asked softly, her voice echoing with a double-layered resonance. "Thanks for the fuel." Dodoria's jaw dropped. His scouter let out a frantic series of high-pitched squeals before bursting into sparks on his face. Her power, it didn't just resist my attack. She absorbed it. Before Dodoria could react, Carol vanished in a streak of purple light. She reappeared directly in front of him, delivering a concentrated photon strike square into his sternum. The impact sounded like a cannon shot. Dodoria's spiky chest armor shattered like porcelain. The shockwave tore through his back, blasting out through his rear armor in a cone of kinetic energy. The pink brute flew backward across 3 city blocks, smashing through a concrete support column before collapsing motionless into a mound of rubble. Zarbin's dilemma. Zarbin took a step back, his crimson eyes wide with rare shock. Dodoria, defeated in a single blow, Zarbin thought rapidly, his mind calculating options at lightning speed. These warriors possess energy conversion abilities and physical attributes far beyond our initial estimates. If I fight them in this form, I risk critical injury. Thor stepped forward, Mjolnir trailing arcs of electricity that scorched the pavement beneath his boots. "Your comrade has fallen, alien. Will you share his fate?" or will you command your fleet to withdraw? Zarbon closed his eyes for a brief moment, taking a slow, measured breath. When he opened them, his gaze was ice cold. "Withdraw, you foolish primitives," Zarbon said smoothly, though his voice carried an edge of cold frustration. "You believe defeating a boorish brute like Dodoria makes you safe? You have no concept of the hierarchy of the cosmos. I am Zarbon, top aide to Lord Frieza, and I am about to show you why our empire has conquered thousands of worlds." Zarbon began to flex his muscles. His smooth, handsome features twisted as veins bulged along his neck and arms. His slender frame began to expand rapidly, his skin roughening into a mottled reptilian green hide. His sleek form vanished, replaced by a grotesque, hulking beast with a wide, tooth-filled maw and bulging muscles. "Behold my true strength," Zarbon roared, his voice now a deep, guttural growl. "A form I reserve only for those who force me to discard my elegance." Captain America raised his shield, stepping up beside Iron Man. "Tony, he's changing shape. Power output is spiking." "I see it, Cap," Stark replied, his suit's HUD flashing red warnings. "Sensors are registering a massive physical density increase. He just doubled his mass in 2 seconds." With a roar that shook the surrounding buildings, the transformed Zarbon lunged forward, his speed defying his massive size. He slammed into Thor before the Asgardian could raise his hammer, sending the god of thunder crashing through the lobby of a nearby skyscraper. Carol Danvers charged, but Zarbon caught her wrist mid-flight, swinging her around and slamming her into the pavement with enough force to trigger a localized seismic tremor. "We are the Frieza Force," Zarbon roared, beating his chest with a heavy, clawed fist. "Your world belongs to us." The Emperor arrives. High above the Earth, in low orbit, the massive purple and white spherical flagship hovered silently. Inside the private transport bay, Lord Frieza sat comfortably inside his hovering pod, watching the battle data stream across his personal holoscreen. He watched as Dodoria's vital signs faded to critical, and as Zarbon entered his monster form to hold off the Avengers. Frieza raised his wine glass, taking a tiny, delicate sip before setting it down on his pod's side console. "How pathetic," Frieza purred softly, his long, purple-tipped tail tapping rhythmically against the metal pod shell. Dodoria allowed himself to be humiliated by a single local life form, and Zarbon has been forced to reveal his ugly form just to keep pace. He pressed a button on his armrest. The bay doors beneath his pod hissed open, exposing the dark blue curvature of Earth 40 miles below. The thin upper atmosphere whistled as vacuum pressure tugged at his pod, but Frieza remained entirely unaffected. "It seems if one wants a planet properly conquered," Frieza said softly, his red eyes gleaming with cruel amusement, "one must do it oneself." With a gentle tap of his controls, Frieza's hovering pod glided forward, stepping out into the cold void of space and descending toward the burning atmosphere below. Earth's first line of defense. The skies above the eastern seaboard were no longer blue. They had turned a bruised, electric purple, choked by iron trails, smoke from shattered skyscrapers, and the unnatural friction of hundreds of atmospheric drops. In Midtown Manhattan, the battle against Commander Zarbon's vanguard raged with unrelenting fury. Zarbon, now fully transformed into his monstrous, broad-jawed reptilian form, was a blur of devastating brute force and surprisingly nimble aerial maneuvers. Every swipe of his clawed hands generated shockwaves that tore through concrete walls like wet parchment, and every volley of pink Kai blasts left deep, glassy craters in the pavement of 42nd Street. Thor exploded out of the shattered lobby of the Chrysler Building, his armor scratched but his eyes burning with blue lightning. He spun Mjolnir at blinding speed, generating a localized hurricane that swept away the thick soot and debris choking the street. "Verily, beast," Thor bellowed, his voice echoing over the thunder. "Thou art strong, but thou hast challenged the wrong realm." Thor launched himself forward, riding a massive lightning bolt. Zarbon snarled, swinging a heavy, scaled arm to intercept, but Thor ducked beneath the sweep and slammed Mjolnir directly into Zarbon's ribs. Crack! A wave of thunderous kinetic force exploded from the point of impact. Zarbin let out a wet, guttural gasp as two of his ribs shattered beneath the hammer's weight. He was hurled backward, tumbling violently across 3 city blocks before crashing into the reinforced concrete base of a parking garage. "Carol now!" Captain America shouted from behind the wreckage of an overturned bus, using his shield to deflect stray Kai fire from surviving alien troopers. From high above, Captain Marvel descended like a falling star. Her body radiated blinding golden-white photon energy, amplified by the Kai she had absorbed from Dodoria earlier. She folded her arms into her chest, concentrating her energy into a single point before thrusting both palms downward. "Photon blast, maximum output," Carol roared. A pillar of pure cosmic fire erupted from her hands, blazing down into the garage where Zarbin was trying to push himself up. The energy beam struck with the force of a tactical warhead, vaporizing the concrete structure instantly and sending a mushroom cloud of white-hot plasma surging 200 feet into the air. When the dust began to settle, the street was quiet save for the crackle of burning electrical wires. Inside the glowing crater, Zarbin lay on his back, his armor destroyed, his green skin charred, coughing up dark blood. His monstrous form shuddered before shrinking back into his sleek, handsome original state. His red scouter lay shattered beside his head. "Impossible," Zarbin wheezed, staring up at the heroes through blood-filled eyes. "Primitive life forms possess power levels over 50,000. Iron Man landed beside Carol, his repulsors humming softly as his suit ran diagnostic scans on the fallen commander. "Sensors say he's still breathing, but he's out of commission," Stark reported, his faceplate sliding up to reveal his sweat-stained face. "Cap, we need SWORD containment units down here ASAP. These guys aren't standard aliens. Their biological energy output is off the charts." Steve Rogers stepped up to the edge of the crater, his shield held ready. "Where's the rest of their command? A force this big doesn't land without a flagship leader." Before Stark could answer, a sudden, terrifying stillness settled over Manhattan. The pressure of an emperor. It was not a noise, it was a weight. The ambient temperature in the air dropped instantly by 20 degrees. The atmospheric pressure spiked so violently that car windows across 6 surrounding blocks shattered simultaneously. Rain puddles in the street began to vibrate, then floated upward in small, gravity-defying spheres. Thor froze, his grip tightening on Mjolnir as the hairs on his neck stood on end. "By All-Father Odin, what is this feeling?" "Tony," Carol whispered, her jaw clenching as her cosmic sense screamed warnings into her mind. "Tell me you feel that." "My suit's internal pressure sensors are glitching," Stark said, his tone dropping all hint of sarcasm. "It feels like the air itself is turning into lead." High above them, thousands of feet up in the troposphere, the clouds parted in a perfect circle, pushed aside by an invisible force. Descending slowly through the eye of the storm was a small, white-and-purple hovering pod. Seated inside, resting his chin casually on his hand, was Lord Frieza. He wore no armor beyond his natural bioshell. His small, childlike frame looked almost frail compared to the towering Zarbin or the hulking Dodoria. Yet the energy radiating from his tiny body was so dense, so suffocating, that even Captain Marvel felt a cold knot of dread form in her stomach. Frieza looked down at the ruined street, his crimson eyes sweeping over the defeated forms of Dodoria and Zarbin. A faint, polite smile touched his lips, a smile utterly devoid of warmth or humanity. My, Frieza said softly. His voice was light, refined, and carried across the shattered city through sheer Kai projection, echoing clearly in the ears of every hero present. "I leave my 2 top commanders alone for 10 minutes and a group of local primates manages to beat them into the mud. How delightfully embarrassing." Frieza's pod drifted gently down to street level, hovering 3 feet above the scorched asphalt. He pressed a small button on his armrest, and the pod's harness released. Frieza stepped out into the open air, his bare white feet touching the ground with a faint tap. His long, purple-tipped tail whipped lazily behind him, tapping against his leg. So, Frieza purred, folding his arms behind his back as he looked up at Thor, Carol, Stark, and Captain America. You are the local champions of this little blue rock. I must congratulate you. It is not often that wild beasts manage to kill my pet dogs. Steve Rogers stepped forward, taking a stance in front of the team. I don't know who you are, but your invasion ends here. Your vanguard is defeated. Order your fleet to stand down and leave Earth immediately. Frieza tilted his head, letting out a soft, high-pitched chuckle. Ooh, how bold! A creature in a brightly colored costume giving orders to Lord Frieza. Tell me, red and blue little man, do you honestly believe you have won something today? Frieza raised a single right hand, extending his index finger toward Captain America. A tiny, pinprick dot of crimson energy igniting at the very tip of his claw. Let me demonstrate the difference between your local squabbles and the power of a Galactic Tyrant. The Death Beam. Cap, move, Stark screamed. Before Steve Rogers could even react, Frieza flicked his finger. Zip! A needle-thin beam of red light cut through the air at near-relativistic speed. It was so fast that even Carol Danvers' cosmic vision barely registered the motion. The death beam struck Captain America's vibranium shield dead center. The vibranium, capable of absorbing kinetic impacts from godlike beings, vibro-resonated violently under the hyper-concentrated thermal and kinetic pressure of Frieza's Kai. The shield held, but the sheer momentum behind the needle-thin beam was so colossal that Steve was lifted off his feet and blasted backward 300 yards, crashing through the solid stone facade of the New York Public Library. CAP, Stark yelled, firing a pair of full-power repulsor beams directly at Frieza's chest. Frieza didn't even bother to dodge. He casually swatted his hand sideways, flicking both repulsor blasts into the sky with his bare palm as if swatting away pesky flies. The deflected beams exploded high in the clouds, lighting up the sky. Is that your primary offensive weapon? Frieza sneered, turning his gaze toward Stark. How utterly boring. In a flash of movement so fast it defied human sight, Frieza vanished from where he stood. Stark's suit sensors screamed a proximity alert from behind, but before he could rotate his torso, Frieza's purple tail whipped forward like a steel cable, wrapping tightly around Iron Man's neck. Frieza lifted the armored hero off the ground with a single flex of his tail, dangling him in the air. Stark gasped as the nanotech suit groaned under the immense squeezing pressure. A metal shell to hide your fragile biological frame, Frieza mocked, looking into Stark's glowing visor. You are nothing more than a turtle inside a toy box. Frieza brought his right fist back and struck Iron Man in the center of his chest plate. Boom! The shockwave tore the air apart. The nanotech chest armor caved inward instantly, shattering the arc reactor beneath it. Stark shot backward like a cannonball, skipping across the asphalt before crashing into a row of parked buses, which detonated in a massive firestorm. Gods and cosmic might. Halt, monster! Thor charged, raising Mjolnir high above his head. A thick, roaring bolt of lightning struck the hammer, illuminating the entire block in blinding white radiance. Thor brought the hammer down with all his divine strength, aimed straight for Frieza's skull. Mjol, Nerd demands your blood. Frieza didn't move a muscle. He raised his left hand upward, casually catching the glowing face of Mjolnir with his bare, three-fingered palm. THUMMMM. A shockwave of electrical and kinetic force radiated outward, shattering every street lamp for miles, but Frieza's arm didn't even tremble. The god-forged hammer, capable of shattering planets, was brought to a complete dead stop by Frieza's bare hand. Thor's eyes widened in sheer disbelief. What manner of beast art thou? Frieza smiled, his red eyes crinkling with cold delight. A god? Is that what you think you are? How quaint. In my universe, gods are merely weaklings who sit in their temples while I buy and sell their worlds. Frieza squeezed his hand around Mjolnir's head. The magical metal creaked under the sheer pressure of his physical grip. With a sudden twist, Frieza kicked Thor square in the gut. The strike sounded like a thunderclap. Thor coughed up blood as he was folded completely in half, his breath instantly expelled. He shot through 2 skyscrapers, disappearing into the concrete jungle of Manhattan. Before Frieza could turn around, Captain Marvel slammed into him from behind, her photon energy radiating at binary-level intensity. She tackled Frieza into the sky, flying higher and higher until they broke through the cloud layer into the upper atmosphere. "You're not destroying my planet," Carol shouted, pummeling Frieza's face with rapid-fire photon punches. Each strike landed like a nuclear detonation, shaking the sky. Frieza took the blows, his head tilting slightly with each strike, but his expression remained calm, amused even. High above Earth in the cold near-vacuum of space, Frieza caught both of Carol's wrists in his hands, stopping her fists cold. "Your energy is interesting," Frieza noted smoothly, looking into her glowing eyes. "It is bright, clean, and entirely insufficient." Frieza's tail whipped around, striking Carol in the temple with enough force to shatter asteroids. As she reeled back, stunned, Frieza gathered a crimson sphere of Kai in his hand, a supernova in miniature. "Return to your dirt world, little girl," Frieza purred. He slammed the glowing sphere into Carol's chest, detonating it point-blank. The explosion blew Carol straight out of the sky, sending her crashing back down to Earth like a falling meteor, impacting Central Park with enough force to register a 6.5 earthquake across Manhattan. Frieza hovered alone in the high atmosphere, his white skin gleaming beneath the harsh sunlight of Earth's sun. He looked down at the smoke rising from the city below, dusting off his shoulders with a delicate gesture. "And to think, I haven't even used 1% of my power," Frieza said softly to himself, his tail flicking with bored satisfaction. "What a disappointing little world." Tyrant's arrogance. The sky over North America had quieted into a suffocating, heavy silence. The smoke from the devastated grid of Midtown Manhattan coiled upward into the high troposphere like dark, jagged pillars, blotting out the late afternoon sun. In the center of Central Park, a deep, smoking crater spanned nearly a quarter of a mile. At its epicenter lay Captain Marvel, her binary aura extinguished, her breathing shallow as golden energy flickered weakly around her bruised frame. Miles away, buried beneath several tons of granite and shattered limestone in the library ruins, Steve Rogers struggled to stand, his vibranium shield groaning under his weight, dented and scorched. Iron Man's armor lay scattered across the asphalt in static-filled pieces, its central reactor dark. Thor, his cape shredded and his face covered in soot and blood, pushed himself up from the wreckage of a collapsed skyscraper, using Mjolnir as a makeshift crutch while his godlike physiology labored to heal his shattered ribs. And above it all, hovering 3 feet above the burning intersection of 42nd Street, stood Lord Frieza. He had not sustained a single scratch. His polished white bioarmor glistened under the smog-filtered light. His long, purple-tipped tail tapped rhythmically against the asphalt with a dry, hollow clack-clack-clack. "How thoroughly predictable," Frieza purred. His high-pitched, refined voice drifted effortlessly across the silent city through sheer Kai projection. He clasped his hands behind his back, shaking his head with an air of theatrical disappointment. "You mortals always construct such grand narratives around your so-called heroes. You wear shiny metal, wield divine trinkets, and boast of your unbreakable resolve. Yet when confronted with true power, you break just as easily as any common peasant." He paused, looking down at his clawed hand, opening and closing his fingers with lazy interest. "I must admit, for a moment, I expected a challenge. When my scouters registered signatures in the tens of thousands, I thought perhaps this dimension had bred something worthy of my personal attention, but you are merely larger insects, loud, colorful, and entirely frail. The gathering of Earth's mightiest." Frieza's cold amusement was cut short by the sudden opening of multiple dimensional portals. Sparkling, golden rings of eldritch magic materialized in the air around the ruined square. From one portal stepped Dr. Stephen Strange, the cloak of levitation billowing around his shoulders, the eye of Agamotto glowing with an eerie emerald radiance against his chest. Beside him stood Wung, holding a pair of shimmering Tau mandalas. Simultaneously, a high-frequency jet engine roared overhead. The Quinjet of the X-Men cut through the smoke, hovering above the street as four figures descended onto the battlefield. Cyclops, his ruby quartz visor glowing crimson. Storm, her eyes completely white as gale force winds whipped her dark hair. Wolverine, popping his adamantium claws with a metallic snick. And Colossus, his skin transformed into gleaming organic steel. From the west, a flash of silver light announced the arrival of the Fantastic Four's Fantasticar. Mr. Fantastic stretched down to the street level, his form fluid, while the thing landed with a heavy thud that shook the pavement, his rocky fists clenched tight. "Stay back," Thor shouted, stumbling out from the dust cloud, his voice ragged. He is unlike any conqueror we have faced. His physical strength matches the Hulk and his energy. It is pure, unadulterated malice. Frieza tilted his head, his crimson eyes scanning the new arrivals. His smile widened into a cruel, toothy sneer. "Ooh, more bugs have crawled out of the woodwork," Frieza chuckled, his tail flicking with rising delight. "A man who stretches like rubber, a wild beast with metal claws, a wizard in a cape. Tell me, is this a planetary defense force or a traveling circus?" "He talks too much," Wolverine growled, stepping in front of Cyclops. He crouched low, his adamantium claws catching the ambient firelight. "I don't care if he's an alien emperor or a cosmic god, he bleeds like anyone else." "Logan, wait," Cyclops warned, raising his hand. "We don't know his capabilities." Too late, Wolverine lunged forward with explosive speed, diving through the air with his claws extended straight for Frieza's throat. Frieza didn't even turn his body. He simply raised his purple-tipped tail. WHAP. The tail struck Wolverine midair with the force of a speeding locomotive. The adamantium-boned mutant was blasted sideways at Mach 3, smashing through 3 concrete support pillars before vanishing into the depths of a subway tunnel below. "Logan," Storm cried out. She raised her hands to the heavens, her voice booming like thunder. "Winds of the atmosphere, tear this invader from the sky." The temperature plummeted. A localized hurricane materialized within seconds, unleashing a barrage of razor-sharp ice spears and 100,000-volt lightning strikes directly down upon Frieza. The sky roared as the elements themselves sought to crush the alien tyrant. Inside the raging tempest, Frieza stood completely unbothered. The lightning strikes dissolved harmlessly against his natural Kai barrier. The ice shattered into dust before touching his skin. "Weather manipulation," Frieza sneered, stepping calmly out of the eye of Storm's hurricane. "How quaint! In my empire we do not call upon the weather, we erase the atmosphere entirely." Frieza pointed 2 fingers upward. A tiny, ruby-red dot of Kai ignited at his fingertips, then expanded instantly into a shockwave of kinetic pressure that blew Storm's hurricane apart like smoke in a gale. The pressure hit Storm directly, knocking her unconscious and sending her falling toward the pavement. Mr. Fantastic caught her midair with an elongated arm, pulling her back to safety. Magic versus Imperial Kai. "This isn't a physical battle," Dr. Strange said, his face stern as he stepped to the front line. The eye of Agamotto spun open on his chest, revealing the bright green glow of the time stone within, while his hands wove complex, glowing, golden geometric patterns in the air. His energy is non-magical, but its sheer volume is overwhelming standard physical reality. "Can you bind him, Steven?" Wong asked, taking a defensive stance. "I can try," Strange replied. "Bands of Sitorak." Thick, crimson bands of magical energy erupted from the pavement, twisting like giant mystical serpents and binding around Frieza's arms, torso, and legs. The crimson magic locked Frieza in place, pulling him down toward the asphalt. Frieza looked down at the glowing red bands binding his body. He pulled against them slightly, feeling the mystical resistance anchor his limbs. "Oh," Frieza murmured, a flicker of genuine curiosity in his red eyes. "This isn't Kai, nor is it tech. It feels ambient, unrefined." "You are bound by the crimson bands of Sitorak, alien," Dr. Strange declared, hovering several feet off the ground. With his mystical shields ready, they are unbreakable by physical means. "Unbreakable?" Frieza repeated, his voice dropping an octave into a dark, murderous tone. You simple-minded ape. There is no force in this or any other universe that can bind Lord Frieza. Frieza took a deep breath. His small chest expanded. VROOM. A blinding, translucent purple aura erupted around Frieza's body like a rising sun. The ground beneath his feet detonated upward into a 100-foot crater. The sheer force of his expanding Kai exerted raw, multi-ton atmospheric pressure in every direction. The crimson bands of Sitorak began to stretch, groan, and crack. Glowing red fragments of magic broke off like brittle glass under the immense pressure of Frieza's rising energy output. "Impossible," Strange gasped, his hands trembling as he struggled to maintain the spell. He's overpowering the physical manifestation of the spell with raw kinetic output. Shatter. With a deafening roar of energy, the magical bands disintegrated into dust. The explosive shockwave blew Dr. Strange and Wong backward, their mystical shields flickering violently as they absorbed the kinetic backdraft. The Tyrant's ultimatum. Frieza hovered up into the air, looking down at the scattered, bruised champions of Earth. The Fantastic Four, the remaining X-Men, the Avengers, and the Masters of the Mystic Arts were all pushed to their physical limits, breathless, bleeding, and astonished. Frieza raised his hands to his sides, his head tilted back as he laughed, a high, mocking, echoing sound that filled the silent ruins of New York City. "Gahahaha, look at you," Frieza shouted, his red eyes blazing with total, unadulterated arrogance. "Is this the absolute best this universe has to offer? A collection of mutants, wizards, and men in tin suits. You fought with such fire, yet you couldn't even force me to take off my scouter, if I still had one." He dropped his hands, floating down until he was barely an inch above the ground. He looked over the battered heroes with utter contempt. "I am Lord Frieza," he announced, his voice smooth and cold as ice. "Ruler of thousands of worlds, conqueror of galaxies, I came to this world expecting a transaction, a quick purge, and a profitable sale. But you have amused me." Frieza crossed his arms over his chest, his tail whipping back and forth behind him. "I shall give you a choice, champions of Earth," Frieza purred. "You have 24 hours to gather every living soul on this planet. You will line up across your landmasses, drop to your knees, and pledge your absolute loyalty to the Frieza Force. Do this, and I might allow a few million of you to live as my personal labor force." He raised a single finger, pointing it straight up toward the sky. A tiny, dense sphere of dark purple Kai ignited above his fingertip, humming with enough concentrated energy to boil an ocean. "Refuse," Frieza smiled, his teeth gleaming in the dark shadow of the ruins. "And I shall do to this blue pebble what I did to the planet of the Saiyans. I will reduce your world to cosmic dust in a single second." Frieza extinguished the Kai sphere with a casual flick of his wrist. He turned his back on the heroes, floating back toward his white and purple hovering pod resting in the center of the street. 24 hours, Frieza said without looking back. "Pray to whatever pathetic gods you worship, you are going to need them." The escalation, the silence that followed Lord Frieza's departure, was heavier than any thunderclap. Across the shattered remnants of 42nd Street, smoke curled slowly into the dark, bruised sky. The heat radiating from glassed asphalt shimmered in waves, creating distorted illusions of the ruin left behind. Earth's defenders, a battered assembly of Avengers, X-Men, Fantastic Four, and Masters of the Mystic Arts, stood or knelt in the debris. Tony Stark, his primary armor stripped away, sat resting against the blackened frame of an overturned bus, clutching a broken rib while his nanotech interface flickered wildly in his eye display. Thor stood nearby, using Mjolnir as a support, his breath ragged, his divine blood dripping from a gash across his temple onto the scorched stone. 24 hours, Steve Rogers said quietly. His voice was hoarse, but his jaw remained set in a rigid line as he picked up his dented vibranium shield from the dust. "He gave us 24 hours to surrender." "He wasn't bluffing, Cap," Stark muttered, staring at the telemetry readings recorded by his suit's surviving sensors before the power grid failed. "That tiny sphere of energy he generated at the end. The particle density wasn't magical and it wasn't nuclear. It was raw, compressed kinetic plasma. If he had dropped that sphere onto the street, it would have cracked the tectonic plate. Dr. Strange stepped forward, his cloak of levitation scorched at the hem. His hands trembled slightly as he closed T. Eye of Agamotto. The physical threat is monstrous, but it is his spirit that concerns me, Strange said, his tone icy and grave. There is no soul inside that creature, only a vacuum of pure, malignant ambition. He views entire civilizations the way a child views sandcastles on a beach. Then we don't negotiate, Reed Richards said, wiping dust from his blue uniform as he knelt beside an unconscious Ben Grimm. We coordinate. This isn't just a threat to New York or North America. This is an extinction-level event for Earth. The Imperial flagship. High above the planet's atmosphere, in the silent cold of low Earth orbit, the massive spherical flagship of the Frieza Force hovered like a pale moon. Inside the Grand Bridge, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Dozens of alien officers worked furiously at their consoles, their scouters chirping in rapid, frantic bursts as they processed incoming data from the planet below. Zarbon, his injuries treated with high-grade Imperial medical spray, stood near the central platform, his arm wrapped in specialized bio-bandages. Lord Frieza sat in his elevated hovering pod, sipping a tall glass of purple wine. His tail flicked with quiet, rhythmic boredom against the metallic hull of his pod. "Report, Zarbon," Frieza purred without looking away from the viewport, where the blue curve of Earth gleamed against the black void. "Are the locals preparing their formal surrender, or are they attempting something predictably foolish?" Zarbon bowed deeply, his face pale. "Lord Frieza, our orbital planetary scanners indicate high-frequency energy signatures mobilizing across every major continent. The life forms are not assembling to bow. They are consolidating their military forces." Frieza took a slow, delicate sip from his glass. A quiet, high-pitched chuckle escaped his lips. "How delightfully stupid," Frieza whispered. "I give them a chance to live as my slaves, and they choose to spend their final hours building bigger sticks. Tell me, Zarbon, have they managed to produce anything that registers above my current power?" "No, my lord," Zarbon replied quickly. "However, we are detecting unusual energy spikes outside standard Chi parameters, mystical anomalies from the northern landmass, atmospheric disturbances in the eastern hemisphere, and a massive orbital tracking lock originating from a sovereign territory called Latveria." Frieza raised an eyebrow, setting his wine glass down on the pod's armrest. "Latveria? What a ridiculous name, and who commands this little parcel of dirt?" Before Zarbon could answer, the bridge's primary communications array flickered violently. The wide holographic projection screen in the center of the room shattered into static before resolving into a sharp, terrifying image. The monarch of Latveria. Hovering in the center of Frieza's bridge was a life-sized holographic transmission of a man clad in gleaming titanium armor and a sweeping green cloak. His face was concealed behind a cold, iron mask, and his eyes burned with a dark, supreme confidence. "Interloper," a deep, metallic voice echoed through the bridge speakers, carrying a weight of absolute authority that made several alien technicians flinch. "You stand before Dr. Victor Von Doom." The bridge fell deathly silent. Zarbon reached for his sidearm, but Frieza raised a single clawed hand, motioning for his aide to stand down. Frieza leaned forward in his pod, his red eyes narrowing with genuine amusement. "Ooh, another metallic ape," Frieza sneered softly. "Tell me, Dr. Doom, did you hack into my ship's comms simply to deliver your surrender in person?" "Doom does not surrender to grandstanding tyrants," the iron figure replied coldly. "I have observed your little display in New York. You possess vast kinetic power and a rudimentary mastery of energy projection, but your arrogance has blinded you to the reality of the realm you have blundered into." "Is that so?" Frieza purred, his tail whipping faster. "And what reality is that, little man?" "You are a trespasser in a world governed by forces far beyond your primitive comprehension," Doom stated, stepping closer to the holographic projector. You speak of conquering galaxies, yet you do not realize that Earth is protected not merely by men in suits or wild beasts, but by magic, cosmic law, and the will of Victor Von Doom himself. Withdraw your fleet immediately, or Doom shall dismantle your empire atom by atom. Frieza stared at the hologram for 3 long seconds. Then, he threw his head back and burst into a wild, high-pitched laugh that echoed off the steel walls of the bridge. Gahahaha, superb, magnificent, Frieza laughed, wiping a tear from his eye with a single claw. A tiny insect on a backwater rock dares to threaten Lord Frieza. I must admit, your species has a magnificent sense of comedy. Frieza's laughter stopped instantly. His eyes turned into cold, dead slits of pure crimson. A list. End to me, iron worm, Frieza hissed, his voice dropping into a register that made the ship's bulkhead groan under sudden pressurized Kai. In less than 24 hours, I will erase your little kingdom, your planet, and every memory of your existence. If you wish to challenge me, come to the capital city of your world tomorrow. I shall personally skin you alive and use your iron mask as a spittoon. Frieza raised his hand and pinched his fingers together, crushing the holographic transmission array. The projection of Dr. Doom dissolved into static. Deep space, the cosmic observation. Far beyond the Earth-Moon system, past the outer rim of the solar system, the spatial disruption caused by Frieza's arrival had not gone unnoticed. Floating in the silent void of space, riding a gleaming board of pure cosmic energy, was a silver figure with smooth, featureless features and glowing white eyes. The Silver Surfer, herald of Galactus, paused in his sweep of the quadrant, turning his head toward the distant blue sphere of Earth. A dark anomaly, Norin Rad whispered to the void, his voice resonating through the vacuum. An entity from a universe devoid of the power cosmic, wielding a raw, violent light that threatens the balance of this cosmos. Beside him, space itself folded, opening a small, star-filled gateway. Out stepped a towering titan with purple skin, wearing golden armor, his chin ridged like stone. Thanos of Titan looked out toward Earth, his dark eyes gleaming with calculating interest. He calls himself an emperor, Thanos murmured, his voice heavy and ancient. He slaughters life not to serve death, nor to balance the cosmos, but out of petty, greedy vanity. He is a chaotic variable. Shall we intervene, Titan? The Silver Surfer asked, his board humming with cosmic energy. No, Thanos replied, a faint, dark smile touching his lips. Let the Conqueror test the strength of Earth's champions. Let him push them to their absolute limits. And when he breaks their bodies, we shall see if his precious Kai can stand against the true absolute power of this universe. Earth, the countdown nears 0. Back on Earth, as night fell over the ruined skyline of New York, the sky did not grow dark. High in the stratosphere, Frieza's flagship began releasing massive atmospheric probes. The devices hovered over key planetary nodes, projecting a massive, deep purple energy grid across the clouds, a planetary containment field to prevent any off-world escape ships from leaving. Inside the Sanctum Sanctorum, Dr. Strange sat cross-legged in the center of a giant, glowing mystical seal. Surrounding him were Iron Man, wearing his newly activated heavy Hulkbuster-derived external rig, Thor, Captain Marvel, recharged by absorbing solar radiation from the upper atmosphere, and Reed Richards. We have 6 hours left, Reed said, pointing to a holographic map of Earth showing Frieza's orbital positioning. He's targeting Central Park again for his final assembly. He wants the world to watch our submission on live satellite feeds. He won't get a submission, Carol Danvers growled, her hands crackling with yellow photon energy. I've recalibrated my bioenergy receptors. Next time he throws a Kai beam, I'm absorbing every drop of it. It won't be enough, Carol, Thor warned gravely, clutching Mjolnir tighter. Thou didst not feel his hand when he caught my hammer. He was holding back. He fought us with the nonchalance of a man stepping on ants, if he unleashes his true form. Then we force him to, Dr. Strange said, opening his eyes, which shone with bright green mystical power. I have spent the last 12 hours weaving a planetary eldritch anchor. If he attempts to channel enough Kai to destroy the planet's core, the spell will redirect the kinetic shockwave into the mirror dimension, trapping the blast. And if he simply beats us to death with his bare hands? Stark asked, his mechanical visor sliding down over his face. Strange stood up, his cloak billowing around him. Then we make sure he bleeds first. The gathering at dawn. Dawn broke over New York City, casting a crimson light over the shattered glass and twisted steel of Manhattan. The air was freezing cold. In the center of the vast, cratered expanse of Central Park, Lord Frieza floated 3 feet above the ruined earth inside his white-and-purple pod. Behind him stood Zarbon and 50 elite Imperial guards, their arm cannons loaded and ready. Frieza checked his internal clock, taking a slow, long breath. "Time is up," Frieza purred, his voice echoing across the silent, empty city, and as expected, not a single soul has come to bow. He stepped out of his pod, his feet landing softly on the scorched ground. He folded his arms behind his back, a cruel, monstrous smile spreading across his face as he looked toward the horizon. Out from the morning mist stepped the champions of Earth. Avengers, X-Men, Fantastic Four, Wakanda Sent. Reich teams and masters of the mystic arts walked side by side, forming a single, unbroken line across the ruined park. Frieza's tail whipped violently against the dirt, throwing up a cloud of dust. "How marvelous," Frieza whispered, his crimson eyes gleaming with bloodlust. "You brought everyone. Today I shall turn this entire planet into a graveyard." Earth united. The rising sun cast a cold, blood-red sheen across the shattered remains of Manhattan. Central Park was no longer a sanctuary of green. It had been churned into a vast, ash-choked arena of upturned earth, shattered bedrock, and glassed crater walls. Standing in the center of this desolate expanse, flanked by 50 elite soldiers of the Frieza force and a freshly patched-up Zarbon, was Lord Frieza. He stood with his hands folded behind his back, his small, pristine white frame practically glowing in the dawn light. His long, purple-tipped tail tapped rhythmically against the dirt, throwing up tiny puffs of dust with every dry clack. Opposing him, lined up from edge to edge of the massive crater, was the largest gathering of superhuman defense forces Earth 616 had witnessed in a decade. In the center stood the core Avengers. Steve Rogers held his dented shield, his jaw set like granite. Beside him, Tony Stark hovered in his massive, heavy-duty Mark XLIV combat rig, its heavy arc reactor humming like a jet engine. Thor stood with Mjolnir resting on his shoulder, divine lightning crackling softly through his braided beard. Carol Danvers floated 3 feet above the ground, her binary photon aura pulsing with a radiant, golden-white intensity. To their left stood the X-Men, Cyclops, Storm, Colossus, Wolverine, Rogue, and Jean Grey. To their right, the Fantastic Four, flanked by Black Panther leading a detachment of Wakandan elite warriors carrying vibranium spears. Hovering above them all were Doctor Strange and the masters of the mystic arts, their hands weaving intricate glowing rings of eldritch magic. "How quaint," Frieza purred. His voice carried effortlessly across the vast crater through pure Kai projection, smooth and high-pitched. "You brought an army to your own execution. Do you honestly believe that adding more ants to the pile changes the outcome when stepped upon?" "We're not here to bargain with you, alien," Captain America declared, his voice echoing across the silent ruins. "This is our home. You've brought war to a world that doesn't break. Stand down, or we put an end to your empire right here." Frieza let out a soft, high-pitched chuckle that morphed into a cold, dark laugh. "Put an end to my empire?" Frieza sneered, his crimson eyes narrowing into lethal slits. "You little apes truly have no concept of scale. Very well. If you wish to die as a collective, I shall grant your final wish." Frieza raised his hand and flicked 2 fingers forward. "Soliders, purge them." "Fire!" Zarbon roared. All 50 elite guards pointed their arm cannons simultaneously. A blinding barrage of purple, green, and crimson Kai blasts rained down upon the heroes' line like a localized mortar strike. The clash of universes. "Defensive positions," Cap yelled. Black Panther slammed his vibranium spear into the ground. activating a sweeping kinetic energy barrier that absorbed the incoming barrage, channeling the kinetic energy into a deep purple pulse. "Wakanda forever!" T'Challa roared, unleashing the stored kinetic wave back at the alien front lines. At the same time, Cyclops reached up and pushed his visor all the way back. A sweeping, optic blast of pure kinetic force erupted from his eyes, a beam 50 feet wide that carved through the dirt and annihilated 20 alien soldiers in a single roaring flash. "Storm, clear the air," Scott shouted. Storm raised her arms to the sky, her eyes glowing solid white. Lightning tore through the dark clouds, striking 3 alien dropships hovering in low altitude and sending them crashing down into the East River in roaring fireballs. Colossus stepped up alongside the thing, both heavyweights lunging into the alien ranks like living battering rams, shattering alien armor with every swing of their massive fists. Wolverine sprinted through the smoke, a blur of yellow and dark blue. He leaped over a heavy laser emplacement, popping his adamantium claws with a sharp snick, slicing through 3 soldiers' arm cannons before they could even adjust their scouters. "Get out of the way, bub," Logan snarled, whirling around to slice through another soldier's chest plate. "These guys hit hard, but they bleed just like any punk in Madripoor." Zarbon drew his sidearm, firing a rapid barrage at Wolverine, but Rogue swooped down from the sky, catching Zarbon's wrist midair. She absorbed a fraction of his alien strength with a touch, throwing the high-ranking aide across the crater and into a ruined concrete wall. Within minutes, the 50 elite guards of the Frieza force were completely overrun and nuked, rallied by the synchronized precision of Earth's combined forces. The monster unleashed. Frieza didn't even flinch as his soldiers fell around him. He didn't even turn his head. He merely watched the display with an expression of mild, irritated boredom. "Useless trash," Frieza muttered, stepping over the unconscious body of one of his guards. "I suppose one cannot expect sub-tier mercenaries to handle wild beasts." He looked up, his crimson eyes locking onto Thor, Captain Marvel, and Iron Man, who were closing in on him from 3 sides. "You seem quite proud of yourselves," Frieza said, his voice dropping into a sinister, rumbling register. "You think because you beat my servants you have achieved something. Allow me to educate you." Frieza planted his feet on the ground. He lowered his head, clenched his fists, and pulled his elbows into his sides. The ground beneath Central Park didn't just shake, it fractured. A golden-purple pillar of raw, crushing Kai erupted from Frieza's body, shooting tens of thousands of feet into the stratosphere and blowing away the dark cloud cover for 50 miles in every direction. The atmospheric pressure spiked so violently that nearby concrete structures collapsed inward under sheer gravitational force. "Sensors are going off the grid," Stark shouted inside his Hulkbuster suit, alarm klaxons blaring in his ears. "Cap, his energy signature isn't just rising, it's mutating. Structural mass increase detected." "What is he doing?" Carol yelled, shielding her eyes from the blinding radiance of Frieza's aura. Inside the pillar of light, Frieza's body began to stretch and warp. His spine cracked loudly, expanding upward as his small frame ballooned to over 8 feet tall. 2 long, wicked black horns sprouted from his head, curving sharply upward like a demon's crown. His muscle mass tripled, his shoulders broadening into a massive, imposing physical wall. The light died down with a deafening boom. Standing in the crater was Frieza's second form. His voice was no longer a refined purr. It was a deep, gravelly, terrifying rumble that vibrated through the teeth of every hero present. "Now," the towering tyrant growled, cracking his knuckles with a sound like snapping timber. "Let us see if your little alliance can withstand a power level over 1 million. The slaughter of the Vanguard." Before anyone could react, Frieza vanished. He didn't fly, he simply moved at a speed that bypassed standard physical sight. Crack! Frieza reappeared directly in front of the Hulkbuster armor. With a single, casual thrust of his massive, horn-adorned head, Frieza speared the heavy armor through the chest plate, impaling the titanium alloy frame on his left horn. "Tony!" Cap screamed. Frieza tossed his head back, launching the multi-ton Hulkbuster suit hundreds of feet into the air like a rag doll. Before Stark could fire his thrusters to stabilize, Frieza leaped after him, appearing above the falling suit and brought both heavy fists down onto its spine. The kinetic impact sounded like a meteor strike. The Hulkbuster armor crumpled into a ball of twisted metal and shattered hydraulics, plummeting straight down and smashing into the park bed, embedding itself 50 feet deep into the bedrock. "By Odindatir's blood!" Thor roared, lunging forward with Mjolnir blazing with divine thunder. He brought the hammer down toward Frieza's head with enough force to split a mountain. Frieza raised his right arm, blocking the divine weapon with his bare, muscle-bound forearm. T-H-U-U-U-U-U-M. The shockwave blew out every remaining pane of glass in lower Manhattan. Thor's eyes widened in sheer horror. Frieza's skin didn't even break. "Is this your god's strength?" Frieza sneered, grabbing Mjolnir's handle right below Thor's grip with his left hand. He pulled Thor close, delivering a brutal, short-range knee strike directly into the Asgardian's abdomen. Thor gasped as blood spurted from his lips. The wind was completely blasted out of him as his armor cracked under the sheer pressure. Frieza spun around, using his thick, heavy tail to whip Thor across the face, sending the god of thunder crashing through 3 blocks of Manhattan architecture before coming to a stop inside a bank vault. "Carol now!" Strange shouted from the air, his glowing green rings spinning around his hands as he cast a temporal slowing field over Frieza's feet. Captain Marvel dropped from the sky like a white-hot comet, entering her binary form. She slammed into Frieza's chest, dragging the 8-foot alien tyrant through 2 miles of concrete and rock, kicking up a wall of dirt 300 feet high. "I won't let you hurt this world," Carol screamed, pinning Frieza to the bedrock and unleashing a continuous, maximum-yield photon blast directly into his face at point-blank range. The energy was so intense it turned the soil beneath them into red-hot lava. The blinding pillar of light could be seen from S. Pace. When Carol finally stopped, her chest heaving, her binary aura dimming slightly from the exertion, she stepped back, coughing in the heat. Standing in the center of the molten lava pool, entirely unscathed, was Frieza. He slowly brushed a speck of ash off his horn, looking down at Carol with an expression of deep, dark amusement. "A valiant effort," Frieza chuckled, his deep voice sending chills down her spine. "Truly, but did you honestly think that this was my final form?" The nightmare deepens. Frieza didn't wait for her to answer. He flexed his massive chest. VROOOOOM. The ground buckled once more. The lava pool beneath them was instantly blown away by a wave of repelling Kai. He's transforming again?" Cyclops gasped from the rim of the crater, his visor trembling as his combat intuition screamed at him to retreat. "It's impossible. His power was already off the scale." Frieza's neck elongated. His skull stretched backward into an unnerving alien dome, his snout protruding into a tooth-filled beak. His shoulders surged outward into jagged white armor plates, and 2 more horns sprouted from his back like demonic wings. Frieza's third form stood before them, a grotesque nightmare shape that looked less like a conqueror and more like a cosmic horror birthed from the dark void between stars. "Ha-ha-ha, heh-heh," Frieza cackled, his voice now a bizarre, layered chorus of high-pitched squeals and deep guttural growls. He didn't even use his hands. He simply flicked his wrist, and a volley of rapid-fire, needle-thin purple Kai blasts shot out from his fingertips at hypervelocity speeds. Zip, 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 zip. The blasts tore through the battlefield like laser artillery. Colossus was struck squarely in the chest, his organic steel form groaning as he was lifted off his feet and blasted back through a city block. Jean Grey erected a massive telekinetic shield, but the sheer kinetic frequency of Frieza's third form Kai rattled her mind, causing blood to trickle from her nose as the shield cracked under the onslaught. Doctor Strange flew into the fray, weaving the hoary rings of Ragador to catch a blast intended for Captain America. But the impact sent Strange tumbling through the air, his mystical concentration shattered. Central Park was in absolute ruin. Earth's vanguard, the greatest heroes the planet had to offer, lay scattered, bruised, bleeding, and pushed to the absolute brink of total defeat. Standing atop a ridge of melted stone, Frieza's third form head tilted toward the sky. He looked down at the battered line of heroes with eyes that contained no warmth, no mercy, and no humanity. "You fought bravely for wild beasts," Frieza's horrifying, multi-layered voice echoed through the ruined streets. "But playtime is over. It is time I show you the form that has extinguished 1,000 worlds." Golden might versus cosmic magic. The air above Midtown Manhattan no longer behaved like atmosphere. It was a superheated ionized plasma field, thick with the smell of ozone, melted copper, and pulverized granite. Standing amidst the glassed, molten floor of Central Park, Frieza's grotesque third form began to crack. The elongated, xenomorphic skull, the jagged shoulder carapaces, and the monstrous physique didn't shatter outward. They collapsed inward. A blinding, immaculate column of white Kai imploded around his body, compressing his massive mass down into a sleek, compact frame barely higher than a man's chest. The blinding glare died away, leaving behind a silence so absolute that the crackle of distant burning gas mains sounded like thunder. Frieza stood in his final form. His body was smooth, pristine white, fitted with gleaming violet bioplates on his chest, shoulders, head, and shins. His crimson eyes were calm, dark, and utterly devoid of rage or passion. His tail, now slender and long, flicked once against the molten earth, cutting through solid stone like a hot knife through lard. "There," Frieza purred softly. His voice had returned to its polite, high-pitched, terrifyingly refined tone. No grotesque muscles, no theatrical horns, just pure, unadulterated perfection. You should feel honored. Very few civilizations survive long enough to witness this body. 20 paces away, the line of Earth's defenders was barely holding together. Thor was on one knee, his golden hair matted with dark blood, using Mjolnir to keep from collapsing onto the scorching rock. Iron Man's main suit was scrap metal. Tony Stark now stood encased in an emergency, bare-bones flight harness, his chest arc reactor flickering in ragged pulses. Carol Danvers gasped for air, her photon aura dimming to a faint yellow flicker as her body struggled to process the immense kinetic trauma. He's smaller," the thing grunted, holding his shattered left arm. "Why do I get the feeling that's a bad thing, Doc?" "Because mass in his species is a suppressor, Ben," Reed Richards said, his face paw. As his suit's handheld bioanalyzers completely fried themselves. He wasn't expanding his power with those transformations. He was holding it back. "Stephen," Captain America rasped, pushing himself up using his dented vibranium shield. "Tell me we have a play." Dr. Stephen Strange stepped to the front of the line. His blue tunic was torn, and his cloak of levitation was singed along the hem, but his gaze was razor-sharp. Beside him, a sudden rift in space folded open with a deep, reverberating hum. Out from the portal stepped Dr. Victor Von Doom. Doom wore no broken armor. His titanium plate shone with pristine coldness, his sweeping green cloak catching the hot wind rising from the craters. In his right hand, he held a glowing, runic catalyst crafted from pure dark magic. On his left wrist, a micro-arc generator hummed at maximum frequency. "You are late, Victor," Strange said quietly, not taking his eyes off Frieza. "Doom arrives precisely when he intends to, Strange," the Latvian monarch replied, his metallic voice echoing with supreme, unyielding arrogance. "I have observed this alien's energy output from my orbital arrays. He relies entirely on primitive physical kinetic output and internal life force projection. He knows nothing of the fundamental laws that govern reality." Frieza tilted his head, looking at Doom with genuine, cruel amusement. "Ah, the little man in the iron mask. You actually came. I assumed you were hiding in your tiny castle, praying to your primitive idols." "Doom prays to no one," Victor declared, raising his gauntlet. Eldritch runes igniting along his metallic arm in brilliant violet and emerald hues. "And Doom does not permit interdimensional garbage to stain his domain. Stephen, align your anchors. We strip this beast of his vanity." The convergence of magic and science. Frieza didn't bother to answer with words. He simply raised his right hand, extending his index finger. Zip! A death beam, faster than any physical projectile in human history, shot directly at Doom's throat. Strange moved instantaneously. With a flick of his wrists, he conjured the mirror dimension, placing an invisible, multifaceted pane of folded reality in the path of the beam. The needle-thin crimson ray struck the mirror pane, refracting into 1,000 harmless splinters of light that scattered into a parallel dimension. "Now, Victor," Strange commanded. Strange threw his hands skyward. "By the 7 rings of Ragador and the light of the Vishanti, bind the physical frame." Glowing, thick crimson chains erupted from the air around Frieza, wrapping tightly around his neck, arms, and legs. Unlike his previous attempt, Strange didn't use pure physical force. He rooted the spell through the time stone resting within the eye of Agamotto on his chest. The chains locked Frieza in a localized temporal stasis loop, attempting to freeze his personal timeline entirely. Frieza's eyes widened slightly as he felt his muscles lock up, not from physical pressure, but because the very second he occupied was being held captive by mystical law. "Doom's turn," Victor von Doom spat. Doom thrust his left hand forward, firing a concentrated antimatter beam combined with high-grade siphon magic. A spell designed to drain cosmic and dimensional energy directly from an entity's core and feed it into Latveria's secondary power grids. A siphoning vortex attached itself to Frieza's chest. The golden-purple aura surrounding the tyrant began to bleed outward, pulled away by Doom's technology and mystical runes. "It's working," Carol Danvers shouted, charging forward alongside Thor. "He's losing energy." Thor hurled Mjolnir with all his divine strength, the hammer trailing a 1,000-foot bolt of lightning that illuminated the ruined skyscrapers of New York in blinding white radiance. Carol joined the strike, firing her absolute maximum binary photon beam directly into the center of the vortex. The combined assault hit Frieza simultaneously. Thor's divine thunder, Carol's cosmic photon fire, Doom's antimatter siphon, and Strange's temporal spell lock. The explosion lit up the eastern seaboard. A sphere of raw, chaotic energy expanded 300 feet outward, vaporizing the surrounding soil into a glass pit 50 feet deep. The ascendance to gold. The smoke cleared slowly. Dr. Strange was breathing heavily, his hands trembling as he maintained the mystic seals. Doom stood tall, his armor humming as it processed the absorbed energy. Did we get him?" Stark asked from his flight harness. Inside the glass pit, a quiet sound began to build. It wasn't a roar, it was a laugh. A high-pitched, hysterical, murderous cackle that vibrated through the bedrock, causing the glass beneath their feet to shatter into fine powder. "Gahahaha, aha. Frieza stood in the center of the pit. The mystic chains of Sitarak were not broken, they were glowing bright yellow. Ow, melting into liquid mana under the sheer thermal heat radiating from his skin. Doom's siphon vortex snapped violently back toward his gauntlet, overloading the armor's power regulators in a shower of sparks. Frieza lifted his head. His eyes were no longer merely crimson, they were burning with a terrifying golden brilliance. "Fascinating," Frieza purred, his voice reverberating through the minds of everyone on the battlefield. "You used time, magic, and energy absorption all at once. For a moment, I actually felt a slight chill. How delightfully marvelous." Frieza clenched his fists and threw his arms outward. H. A blinding, supernova-level flash of pure golden light erupted from his body, forcing every hero to shield their eyes. The sky, which had been dark and choked with smoke, turned bright, burning gold. The atmospheric pressure dropped so fast that sonic booms echoed continuously across the city. When the light receded, Frieza had transformed once more. His sleek white bioshell was gone, replaced by a radiant, metallic skin of polished, gleaming gold. His purple chest plates and headpiece shone like flawless jewels. The aura surrounding him was no longer a harsh purple. It was a swirling, roaring flame of divine golden Kai that distorted the very space around his silhouette. Golden Frieza looked down at Earth's champions. "Allow me to introduce this form," Golden Frieza said softly, taking a step forward. His foot didn't touch the ground. It hovered an inch above the glass, causing the air beneath it to ignite. I called it Golden Frieza, simply because Imperial Master of the Multiverse felt a bit long-winded. The Golden Slaughter. Before Doctor Strange could weave a single defensive rune, Golden Frieza vanished. Boom! Frieza reappeared directly in front of Dr. Doom. Before the Latverian monarch could raise his force fields, Frieza's golden fist struck Doom square in the faceplate. Crack! The titanium mask caved inward. Doom's force fields shattered like cheap glass as the shockwave blasted through his armor. Doom shot backward like a rocket, skipping across 3 miles of concrete, tearing through the base of the Empire State Building before crashing into the Hudson River in a massive geyser of water. "Victor," Strange yelled. Frieza turned his gaze toward Strange. "You next, wizard." Frieza didn't even use a death beam. He simply released a fraction of his golden aura outward in a circular wave. VROOM. The kinetic shockwave hit Dr. Strange and Wong like a solid wall of steel. Strange's eldritch shields buckled instantly. The Sorcerer Supreme was blasted off his feet, his spine slamming violently into a concrete wall as his spell focus was shattered. Thor roared, lunging from behind with Mjolnir aimed at Frieza's temple. For Midgard. Golden Frieza didn't even turn around. His golden tail whipped backward with blinding speed, wrapping around Thor's neck like an unbreakable vice. Frieza lifted the 1,000-pound god of thunder into the air with his tail alone, turning his head to look Thor dead in the eyes. "You speak so much of your gods," Golden Frieza purred, raising his right hand, a tiny, sun-bright sphere of golden Kai forming at his index finger. "Let us see if they welcome you home." Zip! Frieza fired a point-blank death beam directly through Thor's shoulder armor, piercing his flesh and sending the Asgardian crashing to the earth, groaning in agony as divine blood pooled on the scorched stone. Carol Danvers charged, her binary power pushed past its safety limits, her body screaming with strain as she threw a desperate, light-speed right hook. Frieza casually caught her fist with his bare left hand. The impact didn't move him an inch. He squeezed her hand. The bones in Carol's fingers cracked under the immense golden pressure. Carol gasped, dropping to her knees as Frieza looked down at her with cold, mocking pity. "Your energy was delicious," Golden Frieza whispered, pulling her close and delivering a devastating golden elbow to her sternum. "Thank you for the meal." Carol collapsed, her binary aura completely extinguished, lying unconscious at his feet. The final stand. The battlefield was silent once more. Earth's greatest defenders lay broken around the Golden Tyrant. Doctor Strange was bleeding from his forehead, struggling to stand. Thor was down. Carol was out. Doom was submerged in the river miles away. The X-Men, Avengers, and Fantastic Four were battered, exhausted, and out of options. Golden Frieza floated up into the air, ascending 50 feet above the ruined crater of Central Park. He held his right hand high above his head, extending a single clawed finger toward the sky. A tiny dot of dark red and gold Kai appeared above his finger. It began to expand. Within seconds, the sphere grew from the size of a marble to the size of a house, then a city block, then a colossal, boiling sun of dark red and golden energy 300 yards wide. The intense heat radiating from the supernova began to melt the surrounding buildings, turning steel girders into liquid slag miles away. "You put up a splendid fight," Golden Frieza announced, his voice booming across the dying city like the judgment of an angry god. "You used magic, technology, and sheer primitive spirit, but in the end, wild beasts are still just wild beasts." Frieza looked down at Steve Rogers, who was standing alone in the center of the crater, holding his dented shield, his body trembling with exhaustion, yet his eyes still blazing with refusal. "Any last words, red and blue little man?" Frieza sneered, lowering the massive supernova an inch. before I reduce your world to cosmic dust." Steve Rogers wiped the blood from his mouth, looking up at the burning golden ball hovering over his city. "We don't bow," Cap said hoarsely, raising his shield one last time. "Not to you, not to anyone." Frieza smiled, a terrifying golden smile. "Then perish." Frieza flicked his finger downward. The supernova began its final descent, plunging toward the core of the Earth. The cosmic response. The dark red and golden orb of the supernova hung over Manhattan like a falling star, casting a sickly, terrifying glare across the eastern seaboard. At 300 yards wide, its heat was so intense that the Hudson River began to boil, sending massive plumes of scalding steam into the sky. Tectonic plates miles below the borough groaned as the concentrated mass of Frieza's Kai began to warp localized gravity. Steve Rogers stood alone beneath the falling sun, his dented shield strapped tightly to his forearm. He did not run. Beside him, Dr. Strange managed to push himself onto his knees, his hands trembling violently as he tried to gather enough mana to weave one final, desperate dimension-folding shield. "It is over, little insects," Golden Frieza shouted, his voice ringing out with maniacal triumph. "Burn along with your precious blue rock." Frieza thrust his hand downward, accelerating the supernova's trajectory toward the bedrock of Central Park. Then space froze. It was not a spell cast by Dr. Strange, nor was it a temporal loop triggered by the Eye of Agamotto. The fundamental physics of the universe simply ceased to move. The boiling steam on the river stopped rising, the falling debris hung suspended in midair. Even the roaring golden flames of Frieza's aura stuttered and locked in place. High above the falling bomb, a tear in space ripped open. Not a violent extra-dimensional crack like the one Frieza's fleet had emerged from, but a seamless, silent parting of the cosmic fabric. Out from the rift stepped a figure clad in ancient, burnished golden armor, and a sweeping purple helm that towered into the sky. Galactus, the Devourer of Worlds, looked down upon Earth. The gaze of the Devourer. Beside the World Eater hovered the Silver Surfer, his silver board gleaming with pure, unadulterated power cosmic. Norin Rad's eyes shone like twin white stars as he looked past the falling supernova and locked his gaze directly onto Golden Frieza. "This world is balanced within the cosmic order," the Silver Surfer's voice echoed, not through the atmosphere, but directly into the minds of every living soul within 1,000 miles. "Your mindless destruction threatens the balance of this universe, alien." Golden Frieza blinked, his crimson eyes narrowing as he felt the sudden suspension of his attack. He turned his head upward, looking at the colossal form of Galactus, whose eyes burned like twin red giants against the black void of space. Frieza sneered, his golden tail whipping back and forth with sudden agitated speed. "What is this?" Frieza demanded, his refined voice laced with rising annoyance. "Another giant insect playing God? I do not care how big you are, old man. Nothing stops Lord Frieza's conquest." Frieza pointed his index finger toward Galactus's chest and fired a hyper-concentrated death beam, supercharged by his golden form. The golden ray tore through the troposphere at light speed, aimed straight for the World Eater's heart. Galactus did not dodge. He did not even raise a hand. The death beam struck Galactus's chest plate and simply vanished. It did not explode. It did not scorch the cosmic armor. The power cosmic surrounding the Titan swallowed the kinetic Kai instantly, converting it into harmless ambient radiation. Frieza's jaw dropped slightly. "What? My golden death beam absorbed." "Your energy is primitive," the deep, resonant voice of Galactus rumbled. It was a sound that did not travel through air. It vibrated through the atomic structure of reality itself, making Frieza's gold skin hum with unnatural frequency. "It is the crude life force of a beast, unbounded by the fundamental laws of this cosmos. You are an anomaly, a parasite from a foreign reality." Power Cosmic versus Golden Kai. "A parasite," Frieza screamed, his refined composure shattering into pure, unbridled rage. "I am Lord Frieza, master of the universe, conqueror of 1,000 worlds." Frieza abandoned the supernova entirely. He redirected every drop of his golden Kai into his physical frame, vanishing in a flash of blinding light. He reappeared directly before Galactus's faceplate, bringing his golden fist back with enough force to shatter a solar system. Boom! The punch landed square against the Silver Surfer's board, which had shifted effortlessly into Frieza's path. Norin Rad stood atop the board, holding Frieza's golden fist back with a single hand infused with the power cosmic. The shockwave of the impact blew away the surrounding cloud layer for 100 miles, but the surfer's arm did not yield an inch. "You speak of conquering worlds, Frieza," the Silver Surfer said softly, looking into Frieza's shocked crimson eyes. "I have served a master who consumes them to sustain the cosmic balance. You kill for vanity. You conquer out of fear of your own insignificance." "Silence," Frieza roared, kicking his golden leg upward in a violent arc. The surfer caught Frieza's ankle, twisting his wrist to hurl the golden tyrant downward. Frieza tumbled through the air, stabilizing himself 50 feet above the ground, his teeth bared in a feral snarl. "You think you can judge me?" Frieza shrieked, raising both hands to the sky. He began drawing upon his absolute maximum output, the raw, unstable 100% threshold of his golden form. The air around Frieza began to turn into pure plasma. Red and black lightning crackled along his golden bioshell as his energy spiked past every scouter limit that had ever existed. "I will destroy you," Frieza screamed. "I will destroy this planet. I will destroy this entire universe." The Mad Titan intervenes. Before Frieza could unleash his full-power barrage, a sudden heavy shadow fell over him from behind. Space folded once more, and stepping out from a localized gateway was Thanos of Titan. The Mad Titan wore his golden battle armor, his double-bladed sword resting over his shoulder. His dark, cold eyes looked down at Golden Frieza with an expression of deep, clinical detachment. "You boast too loudly, little conqueror," Thanos said, his deep voice carrying a weight that cut through Frieza's roaring golden aura. "You speak of destroying universes, yet you do not even understand the nature of the space you inhabit." Frieza whirled around, his long golden tail whipping toward Thanos' throat. Thanos didn't flinch. He reached out with his left hand, catching Frieza's golden tail mid-swipe. His thick purple fingers clamped down with an iron grip, locking the tail in place. "Impudent ape," Frieza spat, firing a point-blank Kai blast straight at Thanos' face. Thanos tilted his head slightly, letting the golden blast strike his armored shoulder plate. The armor scorched, but Thanos did not step back. Instead, he yanked Frieza's tail violently, pulling the golden tyrant forward and drove a massive, purple fist square into Frieza's abdomen. Crack! The sound was sickening. Frieza's golden form flickered violently as the air was blasted from his lungs. For the first time since unlocking his golden state, Frieza felt his internal organs rupture beneath the sheer, unyielding kinetic weight of a Titan who had traded blows with the Hulk and Thor. Thanos lifted Frieza by the neck, holding the struggling golden alien in the air like a discarded toy. "In your universe, perhaps brute strength and loud declarations are enough to subjugate the weak," Thanos murmured, looking into Frieza's bloodshot eyes. "But here, reality is governed by higher principles. You are nothing more than an arrogant child playing with matches in a room full of gunpowder." The fate of the supernova. High above them, the giant supernova that Frieza had launched earlier was still hovering over the city, its dark red heat threatening to consume Manhattan. Galactus slowly raised his towering right hand toward the falling orb of Kai. He did not fire a beam, he did not cast a spell. He simply opened his massive palm and began to draw the energy inward. The colossal supernova, containing enough compressed kinetic plasma to turn Earth into a cloud of dust, began to warp and stretch, swirling like water draining into a whirlpool. The dark red Kai was pulled up into the sky, streaming directly into Galactus's open hand. The Devourer of Worlds absorbed the entire planet-killing attack in less than 5 seconds, converting Frieza's raw, destructive Kai into pure cosmic sustenance. Galactus lowered his hand, his eyes glowing with cold satisfaction. A crude meal, Galactus rumbled, his voice echoing across the cosmos. Yet sufficient. Frieza, still held in Thanos' iron grip, watched the sight in total, paralyzing horror. The attack he had cultivated to erase worlds had been eaten like a light snack by an entity beyond his comprehension. His golden form began to fade, the Brillia. NT metallic sheen reverted back to his sleek, pristine white final form. His breathing was ragged, blood dripping from his mouth onto Thanos' purple wrist. "No," Frieza whimpered, his voice dropping into a high-pitched, desperate tremble. "No, this cannot be. I am Lord Frieza. I am the ultimate being." Thanos looked at the broken tyrant, a faint, dark smile touching his lips. "You were ultimate in your small pond, Frieza," Thanos whispered, hurling the white-skinned alien onto the scorched stone at the feet of Doctor Strange and Captain America. "Welcome to the ocean." The fall of Emperor Frieza. The cracked, glassed earth of Central Park had grown quiet, saved for the heavy, ragged breathing of the survivors and the faint, electrical hum of dying repulsors. Lord Frieza lay collapsed on his side at the center of the crater. His brilliant golden form had completely unraveled, leaving behind his sleek white bioshell, now stained with crimson blood and gray soot. His long, purple-tipped tail twitched uselessly against the scorched stone, its tip severed during the brutal exchange with Thanos. The Galactic Tyrant, who had spent decades watching civilizations burn from the comfort of his hovering pod, now stared up at the gray, ash-filled sky of Earth with eyes wide with unadulterated terror. Above him stood the silent, towering specters of the cosmos, Galactus, whose eyes burned like cold red stars in the upper atmosphere, and Thanos, who looked down with cold, clinical indifference before turning his back, stepping into a spatial rift that folded shut behind him. This is impossible," Frieza wheezed, his high-pitched voice cracking into a ragged whisper. Blood dripped from his teeth onto his pristine white chest. "I am Lord Frieza, ruler of the universe. I cannot be defeated by primitives." He pushed his trembling hands against the ground, struggling to lift his broken frame. The sheer kinetic shock of Thanos' blows and the total drainage of his golden energy had left his internal Kai reserves completely hollowed out. The convergence of magic. "He's reaching his limit," Tony Stark rasped through his suit's external speaker, stepping forward on battered legs. His flight harness flickered with dying blue sparks, but his suit sensors were locked onto Frieza's vital signs. His energy output just plummeted 90%. He's running on pure adrenaline. Dr. Stephen Strange stepped past Captain America, his cloak of levitation billowing softly behind him despite the absence of wind. The Sorcerer Supreme's face was bruised, his hands scarred and trembling, but his eyes shone with a clear, uncompromising light. Beside him, Victor Von Doom dragged himself out from the smoking crater edge where he had fallen, his titanium mask dented and covered in dust, but his stance as majestic and unyielding as ever. "He is an anomaly, Stephen," Doom said, his metallic voice echoing through the ruins. "A being of pure, unbridled destruction who respects neither cosmic law nor mystical balance. If he is allowed to recover his strength, he will simply return with another fleet or tear another hole in reality." "He won't get the chance," Strange replied quietly. Frieza forced himself to his knees, his red eyes burning with a sudden psychotic surge of fury. "Insects, all of you, I will tear this planet into dust. I will kill your families. I will burn your galaxy to ash." Frieza raised his trembling right hand, trying to pool the last remaining drops of his Kai into a single, needle-thin death beam focused on Strange's heart. "By the light of the Vishanti," Strange declared, weaving his hands in a sweeping, intricate arc, "and the unyielding mandate of time." The eye of Agamotto on Strange's chest burst open. A brilliant, emerald-green radiance spilled across the crater, illuminating the dust motes hanging in the superheated air. Simultaneously, Doom thrust both gauntlets forward, weaving purple eldritch runes that intertwined with Strange's emerald light. Science and magic, light and dark, merged into a single, complex spell array that hovered in the air above Frieza like an ancient, mystical seal. The binding of the tyrant. What is this? Frieza shrieked as the emerald and purple light washed over him. He tried to leap backward, to vanish into a burst of speed, but the air around him had turned into liquid glass. Strange's spell did not attack Frieza's body. It targeted his personal timeline and his internal Kai matrix. Thick, glowing bands of mystical energy, infused with the time-bending properties of the Time Stone and the dark binding magic of Latveria, erupted from the earth, wrapping tightly around Frieza's arms, legs, torso, and tail. "You cannot kill me," Frieza screamed, his voice rising into a hysterical, piercing shriek as he pulled against the bands with all his remaining physical strength. "I am immortal. I am the absolute sovereign of the cosmos." "Why? Oh, are a trespasser," Dr. Strange said calmly, stepping to the edge of the seal. He rotated his wrists, locking the temporal spell into place. "And your reign ends today." The emerald light flared blindingly. Frieza's body began to shrink back, not physically but temporally. The magic stripped away his ability to gather, store, or project Kai, locking his biological frame into a state of total energy stasis. His muscles locked, his vocal cords froze mid-scream, and his glowing crimson eyes were locked into a permanent, wide-eyed stare of absolute horror. A giant, crystalline obelisk of dark purple eldritch glass materialized around Frieza, enclosing the frozen tyrant completely within its multifaceted walls. SHING. The obelisk snapped shut with a sound like a heavy iron vault door closing. Inside the translucent crystal, Frieza stood motionless, suspended in a moment of eternal, powerless stasis, unable to move, speak, or channel a single drop of energy. The aftermath, the silence that settled over Manhattan, was absolute. Dr. Strange lowered his hands, letting out a long, shuddering breath as the eye of Agamotto closed on his chest. He staggered slightly, but Thor caught him by the shoulder, offering a steady nod of gratitude. Doom stepped up to the glowing purple obelisk, running a metallic finger along its crystalline surface. "The seal will hold," Doom pronounced coolly. "He is trapped within a localized pocket dimension where time does not flow and Kai cannot exist. I shall take custody of this artifact and store it within the vaults of Doomstat." "Not a chance, Victor," Stark said, stepping between Doom and the crystal. "That thing stays under SWORD and Avengers supervision in a secure off-world facility." "Do not test me, Stark," Doom growled softly. "It was Doom's magic that finalized the lock." "Enough," Captain America said, his hoarse voice cutting through the tension. He walked to the center of the crater, looking up at the sky where the dark clouds were finally beginning to part, revealing patches of blue afternoon light. "We sealed him together. We decide its custody together. Right now we have a city to rebuild, and a world to heal." High above the planet, Galactus looked down at the silent heroes one last time. Without a word, the Devourer of Worlds turned and stepped back through the cosmic rift, vanishing into the deep void of space alongside the Silver Surfer. On the ground, Steve Rogers looked down at his dented shield, then across the battered line of Earth's heroes, Avengers, X-Men, Fantastic Four, and Sorcerers, all standing together amidst the ashes. The galactic conquest of Emperor Frieza had failed. Extinction of a dictator. The quiet that settled over New York City in the hours after the seal snapped shut was unsettling, almost unnatural. The smoke that had choked Manhattan for 2 days began to dissipate, carried away by a cool breeze sweeping in from the Atlantic. Central Park was no longer a landmark of green lawns and winding paths. It was a blackened, multi-tiered crater of vitrified rock and melted concrete, glowing faintly with residual thermal energy. At the center of that crater stood the crystalline obelisk. Inside its dark, translucent purple walls, Lord Frieza remained frozen. His pale, three-fingered hands were outstretched in a posture of desperate defiance, his crimson eyes wide with frantic, immortal rage, his mouth locked open in a silent, eternally trapped scream. The temporal lock maintained by Dr. Strange and Victor Von Doom held his biology in complete stasis. No Kai could form, No muscle could flex, and no breath could enter his lungs. He was a museum exhibit of a galactic conqueror, preserved at the exact moment of his absolute defeat. The collapse of the fleet. High above the planet, in low Earth orbit, the Imperial dreadnought of the Frieza force was descending into absolute chaos. Inside the grand bridge, red emergency lights flashed rhythmically. Consoles beeped in frantic, discordant shrieks as telemetry monitors displayed the impossible. Lord Frieza's power signature, a signature that had dominated entire quadrants of their home universe, had completely vanished from the spectrum. Commander Zarbin, his arm bandaged and his face pale, stood before the central holoscreen, his hand trembling as he adjusted his scouter over and over. It's gone, Zarbin whispered, his refined voice cracking with sheer panic. Lord Frieza's energy, it didn't drop, it was erased, sealed. Around him, alien officers panicked. Scouters were torn off and thrown to the deck. Technicians scrambled over control panels, attempting to engage warp drives. What do we do? A reptilian officer screamed, grabbing Zarbin's cape. The Earthlings defeated Lord Dodoria, they defeated Lord Frieza. They have monsters down there that consume planetary fire. Before Zarbin could issue a command, the bridge's main viewport darkened. Hovering directly inside the flagship's hull was SWORD's orbital station. The Peak, flanked by 3 Wakandon stealth cruisers and Carol Danvers, who floated in space with her photon aura restored to a steady, warning glow. Abigail Brand's face appeared on the primary communications screen. She pulled down her dark sunglasses, staring coldly at the terrified alien bridge crew. To the remaining officers of the Frieza force, Brand announced, her voice echoing through the ship's speakers with absolute clarity. Your commander is captured. Your advance units are neutralized. You are currently locked in targeting arrays by Earth's orbital defense network and the Captain Marvel long-range battery. Brand paused, letting the silence hang over the bridge. You have 2 options, she continued. Power down your engines, surrender your weapon systems, and prepare to be boarded for intergalactic processing. Or turn your ship around and attempt to flee through the anomaly you came from. If you take 1 step toward Earth's surface, we vaporize your fleet. Zarbin looked at the screen, then at the viewport where Carol Danvers raised a hand, her palm glowing with photon fire. Power down the weapons, Zarbin said quietly, dropping his sidearm onto the steel deck. Signal our surrender. The Vault of the Fallen. 3 days later, deep beneath the bedrock of the Adirondack Mountains, inside the newly fortified SWORD Sublevel 9 facility, a heavy titanium door slid shut with a deep hydraulic hiss. The room was illuminated by soft blue light panels. In the center stood the purple obelisk, anchored to a multi-layered containment platform designed by Tony Stark, Reed Richards, and Dr. Strange. A continuous eldritch containment field hummed around the crystal, reinforced by localized vibranium dampeners that suppressed any potential energy fluctuations. Steve Rogers stood on the observation platform, looking down at the frozen Tyrant through 3-inch thick reinforced glass. His blue suit was clean, though fresh bandages wrapped his forearm beneath his jacket. Tony Stark walked up beside him, holding a digital tablet displaying real-time containment metrics. 0 energy movement, Stark reported, tapping the screen. Strange's temporal loop is completely stable. As far as the universe is concerned, Frieza is stuck in a half-second interval that never finishes. And Doom? Steve asked, not taking his eyes off the crystal. He argued for 12 hours straight about taking it back to Latveria. Stark chuckled softly, though there was no humor in his eyes. In the end, Reed convinced him that keeping it under joint Avengers SWORD monitoring with an active mystical trigger set to notify the Sanctum was the only secure option. Doom signed off, but he left us with his usual warning about primitives playing with cosmic locks. He's not wrong to be cautious, Steve said quietly. We've faced alien armies, cosmic entities, and rogue gods, but this creature was different. He didn't want land, balance, or an ideology. He just wanted to own everything he saw and destroy whatever he couldn't. Well, Stark said, looking at Frieza's frozen, furious face inside the crystal, he found a world that doesn't sell. The legacy of the invasion. Across the globe, the recovery had begun. In New York, Wakandan construction drones worked alongside damage control crews to clear the rubble of Central Park and rebuild the shattered infrastructure of Midtown. In Tokyo, London, and Paris, captured technology from the Frieza Force's drop pods was gathered and catalogued by SWORD and the Fantastic Four, ensuring its hyper-advanced metallurgy and propulsion systems were safely isolated from black-market arms dealers. At the Sanctum Sanctorum, Dr. Strange sat in his study, sipping tea as he reviewed ancient texts on extra-dimensional spatial fractures. Wang entered, setting a fresh scroll on the desk. The spatial rift near Saturn has completely closed, Wang reported. The dimensional boundary between our cosmos and his original universe has stabilized. There are no remaining traces of their extra-dimensional signature. Strange nodded slowly, looking out the window toward the skyline of Manhattan. A good thing, Wang. A universe that birthed a creature like Frieza is not a neighbor we wish to invite back. The Eternal Cell. Deep beneath the Earth, inside the silent blue light of Sub-Level 9, the obelisk stood unchanged. Inside his timeless prison, Frieza could not think, breathe, or move. Yet, at the very edge of his frozen consciousness, trapped in the infinite fraction of a second before his world ended, his crimson eyes remained locked on the void. The Galactic Tyrant who had terrorized galaxies, destroyed planets with the flick of a finger, and brought empires to their knees had met a universe that did not bow. His conquest was broken, his fleet was dismantled, and Emperor Frieza remained forever silent, a monument to an ambition that dared to challenge the Earth and failed.